My name is Ahri Tallon. I'm the coordinator of the Darling Downs Environment Council. Just like to welcome you all here tonight, and yeah, it's really awesome to see so many people in the room. First, I'll just start off by acknowledging the country we're on, the land of the Guyabul, Jarrawa and Western Wakwaka nations, and just acknowledging the thousands of years of looking after this land that Indigenous culture did so well and in becoming deeply in tune and connected to this country, and just acknowledging their elders, past and present, and passing on the knowledge that it took to do that. And yeah, hoping we can continue to learn from them as much as we can. So, thanks everyone for coming this evening. We wanted to wait till after the federal election and the state election and all that other distractions before we really got into this issue and really started to engage the community, because there's been a lot going on, and also particularly with the Highfields central kind of master plan. A new one came out this afternoon. Not sure who's seen it, but yeah, I'm sure you're all thinking about that as well. So yeah, we wanted to get into this issue from the perspective of Protect Trees Toowoomba group, which has been developing over the last 6 months, and also from the Darling Downs Environment Council, because we do have the planning scheme that's currently being developed to be released publicly in the spring for consultation. So it's a pretty important time, and we know the community's been calling for a long time for tree protections, because we've been sick of seeing destruction of big trees unnecessarily. You know, that where planning could work in a way that gets a balance, and that's what we're calling for, a balance between development and nature, where humans can have homes, animals and wildlife can also have homes as well, and keeping that garden city, that garden region, unique kind of legacy to this region, and really maintaining that, so it's something that we can pass on. So that's the vision of this campaign and what we're pushing leading up to the planning scheme. So we know, I'm just going to go through a few slides here first, then we're going to have Scot McPhie, who's hopefully I'm saying it right, ornithologist. He's going to speak to us about what's at stake and a bit about the policy proposals that we've developed. And then we're going to have Rebecca Vonhof, Deputy Mayor, who's a big supporter of tree protections. She's going to give us a bit of an update on where things are at in terms of inside the council, and how important a time that this is to take action. Then we're going to invite people to think about what they want to do to take action. And at the very end we'll have time for some questions and discussions as well. So let's get into it. So there's already been a lot of destruction already. You know, what happened along Reese Road, what's happened in various different places, the avenues, the line of trees there. And we know these big trees, they just hold so much habitat up here, you know, in this beautiful red soil country, where they grow so tall, we've got good rainfall. And this is really important. This whole region along the Great Escarpment is such an important climate refuge as climate warms for animals that are retreating into cooler places in the summer. It's just a really important place, and we live in such a beautiful place, so we want to try and protect it. There's been a lot of news footage covering this issue for a number of years. There's been numerous attempts by council to try and get some solutions in place. Most recently with the TLPI that was proposed last year. Basically what happened is I found on the council website that they said that the planning scheme wasn't going to come out for another year and a half. And so I called up Rebecca and I said, "Oh, did you notice that that had changed?" She's like, "What? The planning scheme's not coming out for that much longer? Okay, let's try and do something now." And that's how the TLPI proposal, the second version of it, was pushed, initially accepted, but then when the council staff really failed to deliver a proposal that really fleshed out what it is that was needed, it did get up, and some of the councils that supported it initially didn't vote for it to go through. So it was a kind of complex situation, and there's a lot of pressures, a lot of variables which we'll talk about, which I'm sure Rebecca will share about, that the council organisation space that's made it difficult to develop that policy and those plans as to how things can change. I was informed just this week that they've got a new environmental planner on board, and that's been a position that's been vacant for quite a while, so that's a really good sign. There's other movements in that we're going to be getting a report that what we would think would outline some of the scope for what tree protections might be installed within the new planning scheme that is due in the next month or so, that was tabled as the alternative to the TLPI going ahead. So there is hope, but I suppose what we're trying to do is bring the community together, because we know that there's some councillors that I know personally, and I won't name names, that don't really think this is an issue. They don't think that we need tree protections, and unless we take up the space and make sure that the community is calling for tree protections loud and clear, they'll take up the space, and that vacuum will be filled when it comes through with planning schemes consultation, and we won't get the strength of protections that we know we need. So here's a map that shows in orange hatching, that's the state mapping for habitat. So here's a few spots around Highfields, and the purple hatching is the TRC mapping. And as you can see, lots of areas of habitat that aren't included in the mapping at all. But the good news is that we found out a few months ago that that mapping has been updated. It hasn't been released yet, but that mapping is, the updated mapping is going to be part of the new planning scheme. So we know preparations being done, being made to change things going forward, which is good news. What we have here is a bunch of slides showing areas where there's currently zoned for residential development, and of course they're still at risk. So what we've got, going to show you through here, is just the slides for the Crow's Nest, Kabala, Highfields area. On the Protect Trees website, we've actually got a whole web page where you can go and look through all around Toowoomba, everywhere that there is habitat at risk from zoned residential development. So here's something, this is still in Crow's Nest. This is Creek Road. But it's a lot of different. It's already been cleared there. Railway Terrace. It's already been cleared. Yeah. Okay. There's lots down the bottom right as well. Down the bottom right? Oh, just this one here. Yeah, in the middle. Yeah. Well, I'm worried about the ones that be at the bottom right, because that's the humongous one. Yeah, this one here.
So that's the behind the industrial estate. Behind the industrial estate.
Yeah. And one of the thing that we're going to have to swallow, and it's a hard pill to swallow, is that even if we get protections in the planning scheme, areas that have been zoned residential and property developments have been approved before that planning scheme change has taken place, they don't get any new restrictions on them. So there could be a property development, and you call these zombies, that was from 5-6 years ago, and it's still going to get through and be able to, interact with habitat the way the mapping guided it to when it was planned in the first place. So that's unfortunately something that we can't change, even though, we'd love to. So mapping has been updated, but it hasn't been integrated into the planning scheme yet, because the planning scheme hasn't changed. So, yeah. Here's a few more.
So
industrial estate.
Because in the on the left-hand side there, right?
Yeah, there's a bit of that.
That's got a major border.
Yeah. Development's going there. There's plenty of paddock there. There's plenty of room where you could work around the trees. And these are lots all within Highfield, so we're not. We haven't been checking plans for any of these proposals, but these are all small lots that might be smaller subdivisions, perhaps. And a few more. It's interesting, the habitat mapping seems to have worked a little bit on that one, but maybe that was because it was state significant. There was other layers of state significant mapping that protected it, perhaps. So that's it for the introduction of the situation that we're in and what's at stake. And now Scott's going to tell that story a little bit further. So I'll hand it over to Scott. Thanks.
Thanks, Ahri, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming along. As you can see, my name is Scot McPhie. I work for BirdLife Australia, and I've been fairly involved in this campaign for a couple of years now. So I was asked to just give a bit of context, a few examples about why the environment is important. And obviously, this is a topic you could talk to for hours and hours. Ecosystems get very complex. So I thought I'd just do a couple of, one little quick example. So everyone probably recognises this spot here. This is Rogers Reserve. The thing I like about this photo is it shows an upper, a middle and a lower story in the forest here. So this is some intact vegetation that we have. And just to give one example of how organisms utilise and I guess create an ecosystem, I just want to look at the birds and that use this area. And the concept of guilds. So guilds in ecology, it's basically a group of organisms that utilise it in the same way for the same purpose. So it's kind of like how they make their living and where they make their living. And so this is just in regard to how they eat. I haven't looked at all at nesting, and as most people are probably aware, hollow nesting, or cavity nesting birds, particularly parrots and cockatoos, are struggling. There's a lot of competition for nesting sites in Rogers Reserve and at Peacehaven Park as the larger trees are getting knocked down in the area. What remains in these sites is very important for nesting. But just looking at hunting or feeding here, as we work from the top down, so you have aerial insectivores, birds like the dollar bird. So I've got a photo for each category over the side there. Dollar birds come down here every spring or summer from Asia, and they're quite interesting because the design of their wing is kind of a hybrid between being useful for migrating, but also being able to hunt. They're not as agile as other aerial hunters like welcome swallows, so they favour clearer areas just above the canopy or to the sides where there's still a lot of insects. Then still at the top, the nectar sippers like lorikeets and honey eaters, which make up a huge part of our avifauna in Australia. They're probably the two most distinctive orders that we have, I think, so, or families that we have. So arboreal insectivores like the pardalate there, bark and foliage gleaners, so birds that run up and down the branches and the trunks. So I've got a tree creeper over there. Mistletoe specialists. Mistletoe birds do actually eat a few other things apart from mistletoe seeds themselves, but also painted honey eaters. And most people might be aware there were at least one painted honey eater that turned up at Highfields Falls a few years ago. Usually John Deering is about the extent of the easternmost extent of their range that they come to in our area. Then as you move down the levels here, so pouncing hunters, robins are very good at that. Butcher birds, kookaburras, a lot of birds just like to sit and look and then pounce, so they're operating more in the mid-story. Nocturnal carnivores like owls or frogmouths. Then when you get down lower, shrubby understory specialists. So we've got a speckled warbler over there. these birds, with my job with BirdLife, with the Lockheed Toowoomba Birds on Farm project, the speckled warblers are declining in southern Australia. So for the other Birds on Farms projects, they're quite a big deal for them to turn up there, but we still have them in locally common numbers here. So certainly worth protecting the habitat that they need. Ground foragers, I've actually seen brown quail in Rogers Reserve, and you just think, how the hell do they get there with all the cats, all the urban areas around there? But they do utilise that. And then seed eaters, which obviously like a bit more open areas, like these red-rump parrots, but you can see them just on the verges. So this, I'm only looking at birds here, and only looking at how they utilise it in terms of food, not nesting, roosting and so on. So you can see just one little bit of habitat has a lot of different uses from a lot of different animals, and again this is just birds. So that's how it works for birds. So what does it do for us? Now, I couldn't resist, I had to put up that picture from the life of Brian there. What have the Romans ever done for us? What has the environment ever done for us? And look, honestly, there are some people in industry and government, present company accepted, who just don't get that. And so when you start to look at what does the environment do for us, this is ecosystem services. So let's have a look at that. This is basically a breakdown on what the environment provides for us. So again, just like looking at the ecology with animals, there's so many different, you can spend hours examining and talking about this, but you can break it down into these four areas: supporting services, provisioning services, regulating services, and cultural services. So you can just read through their supporting services: primary production, nutrient cycling, water and oxygen cycling. Provisioning services: food, fuel, fibre, genetic resources, so the biodiversity that we have in wild populations. So the genetic diversity, I should say, creates resistance and the potential for resistance to diseases and helps allow populations and organisms to basically live longer, survive longer. Regulating services: pollinating, seed dispersal, climate regulation, erosion regulation, and cultural services. What it means to us, and I think all of us have some kind of special relationship with the wild, which gets right down to a spiritual level really. So the big takeaway from this slide is that it's the biological systems on this planet that keep us alive, not the economic ones. The economic systems only control the way in which we access the biological systems, but this is actually what keeps us alive. So what are we doing for the environment? If that's what the environment does for us, what effect are we having on it? And this is a very scary graph. So this is taken from the Living Planet report, the last year's one from the World Wildlife Fund. And you can just see down the bottom here, so they've been tracking population numbers of wildlife. So this is based on 34,836 monitored populations of 5,495 vertebrate species. And this is, this scale, I don't know why they haven't done it as a linear scale. This graph, it really goes all the way a lot lower. So essentially what this is showing is that the average population number, so this is population number, not species numbers. So this is how many animals of a certain type of species. So the average in the world has decreased by 73%. So in round figures, wild animal population numbers are only 25% now to what they used to be in 1970. So think of any population of any animal you like, and on average there would have been 4 times as many 50 odd years ago. So that's basically destroying the thing that's keeping us alive. And when you talk about this kind of thing to people, some people will quote a NASA figure that was released, I think, last year, where they found the world's vegetation coverage increased by 5% in the last 20 years. But that's a very misleading figure because that's based on satellite imagery looking at surface area, and as you would have seen from that photo of Rogers Reserve, forests are 3-dimensional, they're not 2-dimensional, and that actual increase in green pixels is largely agriculture in India and some planting in China and a lot of weedy and shrubby growth as well. It's not actually old growth forests. It's not highly developed forests that provide the ecosystem services that we were looking at before. So if anyone tries to rebuff you with that 5% figure, just tell them it's crap. So, excuse me. Okay, so what can we do about this? Now, the biggest driver of the population loss is habitat destruction, because basically it's the food, it's the home that these animals need to survive. So, quick list of things that we can do. So, plant more local native vegetation. If you can, let your grass go to seed. You should try and run the gauntlet of the council, see how long you can let it last, see how long it can grow for. Because there's a lot of seed-eating birds that are going to need it. It's also very good for those pouncing birds looking for arthropods that are going to live in grass that's not mowed to within an inch of its life. Don't use insecticides. Establish an environmental covenant with the state government. So this is something that's being done by some developers here on a small scale, and it's also something that people can do on their own property as an owner. It doesn't have to be something you're doing as a developer. So this is where you enter into an agreement with the state government that protects a certain area of ecologically valuable habitat. And from the council's point of view, this is something that we will work into our... Is it even in the slide, that 25? No, okay. So this is just something we're getting across. So the City of Moreton Regional Council, Moreton Bay, sorry, give a 25% rate reduction for people who have covenants on their land, because basically you're providing bushland, park or habitat for the betterment of your area for free, and so this is to offset some of your costs in maintaining that. So that's something that we would love to see the council take on board in amongst our proposals. So, okay, create a wildlife-friendly garden, not just bird-friendly. Think of reptiles as well, lots of basking rocks, things like that. Keep your cat indoors. I've got 2 cats. They both live indoors, and I've counted over 100 species of birds on my property. So, yeah, there's just nothing like having so many birds all around you. And if any of your neighbours have their cats out, get a water pistol, put a bit of chili powder, mix in there with it, and the cat's not going to like licking it all off. So, and you know, this is at some stage is something again which councils across Australia, I believe it's got to be instituted by at a state government level, or sorry, the state government could institute this, and that's cat curfews, and then you know, cats not allowed out at all. Yeah, reduce, reuse, recycle. Obviously, delaying consumption or reducing consumption and reusing just has so many benefits, because ultimately, if we're having a net environmental negative at the moment, the way we're conducting our economy, the more that you can pull out of that and reuse things, then the less pressure there is on the environment. Encourage change in local development practices, and this is something that we might talk about just a little bit. We have had some very constructive discussions with the Urban Development Institute of Australia and Stephen Bowers, the developer of the avenues. And I've got to say, this opened my eyes a little bit. You know, I do believe the developers actually do want to do better, and they are trying to do better. There's a horrible matrix of the 3 levels of government, the legislation and the policy that they've got to work with, as well as economic factors. So it's not as easy as just finding one location, tweaking a few things, and then it flows through. It's far more complex than that, and as you'll see in a minute, we've got our policy document, which the UDIA are looking at the moment, and our aim is to come up with we're not going to agree with everything, but we do want to find what we both have in common, and from our initial meetings, there is certainly a fair bit in common. So we want to ratify exactly what that is and take that to council. And you know, I can't see councillors disagreeing to what both the environmentalists and the developers want. Look, this is probably something that the Deputy Mayor needs to talk about, the relationship between what the councillors decide on and then what the operational arm, because it's a very weird relationship between what they can tell them to do and what they can't do. But I'm sure Rebecca will talk about those kind of difficulties and challenges. But I do think if your question was in regard to the developers, then Yeah, they certainly do want to do better. I don't think they ever want to do everything that we want to do. So there's certainly a need for us to push through. Is this mic still going? Yeah. To push through some changes and bylaws to drag them to, I think, where they really need to be. But there's certainly a lot of voluntary movement that I think will happen as well before we have to do that. Okay, so lobby all three levels of government for change in both legislation and policy. So, which is essentially is why we're here tonight. Those, if you're interested, these documents, whereas the World Wildlife Fund one, the DQ one on ecosystem services, and just the thing about guilds and the bird life one here, they're all available online. Just you can Google them if you want. Okay, so this is the essence of, I suppose, our policy document that we've taken to a couple of developers, and we've kind of been working on ourselves. It's still a work in progress. We haven't put the things about the covenants with the government in there yet. But this is what we're hoping to establish. So what do we do? What do we need to do to protect our trees? Create a natural asset local law to protect significant trees. Establish clear criteria for tree protection, age, size, ecological, cultural value, and allow community nominations and transparent decision making. So that's a really key one. So mapping can be updated whenever, and then it can fall out of date really quickly, or can not even be updated at all and just gets out of date. So the idea is, if we have a set of criteria by which we define an important tree or piece of habitat, even if it's not mapped, it doesn't matter. Everyone knows where they stand. We've got the criteria by which this parcel of land is judged. And other councils do this. The Lockie Valley Regional Council do, Brisbane do. But we also want the ability for people to be able to nominate trees, both on ecological grounds and on culturally significant grounds. So it's kind of like crowdsourcing the work in a way, I guess, which is also a good thing to do because it makes it easier for council, but it needs to be in a way that's very transparent, so that if something is nominated, people have a right to reply. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone can spitefully nominate a tree to annoy their neighbour or something like that. It's got to be a very just and transparent process. But we'd like to see that in there, and I know Brisbane have that, and I'm quite sure other councils do as well. Improve mapping and planning protections, update areas of ecological significance, mapping regularly, ensure wildlife corridors and significant trees are mapped and protected, apply protections consistently across new developments. And it was good to hear that the mapping has been updated. It's a bit frustrating that no one can really look at it until the feedback process comes in for the new planning scheme. So is it going to be out of date even by then? I'm sure some parts of it will be, but if we get these criteria in there, then that will circumvent if it gets out of date. And it was a big thing from the developers' point of view as well. They just want certainty. No matter what the framework is, they want to know clearly what they're going to be in for. So I'm sure this is one that they're going to agree with. Strengthen development regulations, require pre-development arborist assessments for brownfield developments, mandate tree protection zones during construction, introduce permits for tree removals with enforceable restoration requirements. And the compliance is a really big issue because no one should be able to build these kind of things in as an operating cost and then just go and demolish what they want. That's something that, and I know compliance costs the council a lot as well, so that's going to require a lot of work to make sure that that works effectively as a deterrent. Stronger compliance and offset mechanisms, fines and restoration orders for illegal tree removals, 3-to-1 minimum tree replacement ratios for offsets, offset funds to support local habitat restoration. And again, that's going to, the devil is in the detail there, because it's very easy for offsets to, the money to be collected, and where is it spent, who even sees it, how transparent is it? And then how effective is an offset anyway? Is it replacing the habitat that was there? Is it adjoining existing habitat, so you're kind of building off that? It's very easy for this to be a get out of jail free card, so there needs to be a whole lot of details.
We had a meetings with the Environment Minister a few weeks back, and we presented on how the offset system is essentially quite broken. It doesn't really work that effectively. You know, you think 3 to 1 for a big tree to 3 little saplings on the ground, and how long they take and how small they are, it's not really a fair deal. So there was encouraging signs that Andrew Powell seemed willing to take on board those concerns, and he's going to, hopefully do a review and try and improve the system. So try and keep the community updated on what happens in that space, because it's pretty important. It's just not working effectively at all at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And enforcement offsets of community engagement, better environmental code implementation, closed loopholes allowing pre-approval clearing, enforce larger buffer zones and stricter mitigation measures, engaging the community, public nominations to protect significant trees in urban areas, which we've looked at, tree monitoring app for reporting removals, which would be very useful, and for reporting nominating trees as well. Annual campaigns to celebrate and protect local trees. So raising the community profile and also giving the community ways to get engaged, a big part of this happening successfully too. And I think developers are aware of that, because it affects their bottom line, and if they do something that's the community doesn't like and it's not ecologically justifiable, then there will be a backlash and it will affect their sale prices as well. Okay, so that's it from me. We are going to have questions afterwards, but I'd like to invite Deputy Mayor Rebecca up to talk from the Council's perspective.
I'm just going to ask each of you to think about why you're here tonight and what it is that is so important to you about the environment. To start with, I'd like to say thank you to Ahri, thank you Scott, and how great it is to see my council colleague Bill Carl here in the audience. And it is a real pleasure to be with you tonight. And I look forward to the question and answers. I'm going to give it to you as straight as I possibly can and answer as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things. First of all, the planning scheme. Second of all, planting in detention basins. And third, the motion that Ahri talked about from December. So the planning scheme. The first thing, actually before I do that, I want to ask, what is it? I don't usually ask for audience participation, but what is it about the environment that brought you here tonight? If I can just have 1 or 2 people put their hand up and let me know so I can pass the mic to you. Be brave.
I think it's the whole concept of keeping Highfields in a rural and tree-loving area that it's been famous for and known for years. And there's too many organisations coming in to destroy the whole atmosphere and environment of Highfields area.
Thank you, Diana. I saw another hand here.
For me, it's a kind of grief at the crisis of biodiversity we have, which is obviously worldwide, but we see it in our local patch, and we can do something about it.
Thank you very much. And last one.
Thank you. I believe our quality of life, all aspects of it, are directly impacted by our lack of access to the environment, and the poorer the environment, then the poorer our quality of life. And if we look forward to our children and climate crisis and grandchildren, it doesn't look good. We've left a lot of damage.
Thank you, Jill. So I think with all of this, the important thing to keep in mind is that what we're trying to do here is so time sensitive. It's so time sensitive. And I have said this for a couple of years, and Councillor Bill, you've been saying it as well. And believe me when I say we are working really hard, but we actually really need your voices as well. So the planning scheme. I've never been through a planning scheme before, but it is a wild old ride. So this is my 5th year in council, and the mic is back. My 5th year in council, and the planning scheme work started, I think, about 4 years ago on this. I'm looking to Councillor Bill and he's nodding. Now, councils do these planning schemes every 10 to 12 years, And it's designed, I suppose, to try to, it's an acknowledgement that times change, that population change, that housing demands change, that industry change. And the map and the roadmap for planning then therefore has to change as well. We, I would say, are at least another year off finishing that planning scheme. It costs millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it is a long and arduous process. We have had a couple of things happen during the journey of the planning scheme that are worth explaining and pointing out. The first is that the state government, the former state government, announced a Shaping South East Queensland body of work. And basically what that was about was they acknowledged that there's a lot of people moving to South East Queensland, and where are they all going to live, and what are those cities going to look like, what are those towns going to look like. And so they set population targets for all of South East Queensland, including Toowoomba. Now Toowoomba's population target is significant, but it's not the same as places such as Ipswich and Moreton City, where their populations ostensibly are expected to double. So part of the work in that Shaping South East Queensland plan, they do actually talk about not just the population targets, but also the greenery targets. Now that might be very helpful for us and very useful for us when we're trying to do our work on canopy. Because if it is stipulated that there's an expectation from the state government that a certain percentage of canopy is to be met, then we must do that. We've been doing work on the canopy cover, and it was a masterstroke, I have to say, that we got it into the operational plan. Because what we can do, that mapping is happening at the moment, and Councillor Bill and I actually got some information today on this, and the rest of our council colleagues. And what we can do with that canopy coverage mapping is we can see what's happened over time, and we can also see where there's discrepancies. So hypothetically, we can see that one suburb may have, for instance, 27% canopy cover, and another suburb, for instance, may have 13%. And there's questions that come with a reduced canopy cover, a lot of questions, but everything from your quality of life as you're walking down the street, and in really hot days, do you have shade above you? When there's a torrential downpour, how quickly does the water run down the street and cause flooding downstream? Scott, everything that you talk about with the wildlife that has somewhere to live. So there's a huge potential discrepancy there, and we need to make sure that there is equality in the canopy cover. So if we can get that information and that mapping, what we can then do is plug it into a planning scheme and make sure that there are numbers of trees planted to hit those canopy covers. We've had some changes in the planning department in the 5 years that I've been there. We've had 2 general managers, an interim general manager, and now we're getting another general manager. His name's Ed Johnson. He's coming to us from Cairns Council, and he starts in 2 weeks. We hear really good things about him, so we're really hopeful that this is going to be the person who lands the plane for us with the planning scheme. What else to talk about with the planning scheme? Mapping. The mapping is, and I'm happy to take questions at the end, but the mapping has been personally for me, a disappointing process, because it has taken a really long time, and I'm actually very grateful that the state government, both the former and this one, has a vision for mapping, because that will give us a real wiggle along and kind of force us to get with the program. But other areas, such as Moreton City, are doing really interesting things with their mapping. They're using AI, and it goes a lot faster than somebody manually looking through maps and making annotations and then going and ground truthing. Is that a piece of something on a roof or is that a tree? I mean, the AI can do that really quickly. And that's important because, as I said at the start, everything to do with the environment is time sensitive. So local government, because we can be quite risk averse, we're sometimes pretty slow to take, I don't think you'd call us early adapters. But there are other places that are doing this, and that will hopefully smooth the path for us. Then I wanted to talk about detention basins. Now, they are basically structures that are made to slow down the flow of water and hold water back so it doesn't cause flooding. And we've got a fair few in our area. And what we're looking at is planting trees in those basins. There's been a motion that's come to council, it's been supported, so that body of work is going on at the moment. To me personally, it seems like low-hanging fruit. We should be able to do this. The only question that we've had raised is, would the structural integrity of any of those basins be potentially compromised by planting after they've already been designed and constructed and in existence for 5, 10, 15 years? I mean, I'm not an expert and I will wait for the experts to tell us that. It seems like that shouldn't be a problem, but we'll just wait and see. The other thing I wanted to...
It's not a problem.
Great. I'm hoping you're an expert who can tell us... Great. Tell us, council, and that would be amazing. There are years, but it again comes down to the voices. It again comes down to the voices of all of you in the room and everybody outside of this room. The third thing I wanted to talk about, and it probably touches on something that Ahri or Scott you mentioned, and it was the TLPI being defeated in December. We accept that was the outcome of that council decision, but part of that council decision was also that there be investigations undertaken into areas of ecological significance in our area, that work come back to council next month in June at the latest about ways that those places of ecological significance can be protected. So that was a direction of council, that was a motion of council, and the deadline that was set on that motion was next month. So that is the expectation of councillors, that body of work will come to us and it will be a fulsome report. In terms of what councillors can direct, the only person who can direct in the council is the mayor. Outside of that, Councillor Bill and I, we can't ask Lynn, the engineer in the water department, to go and do something. We would not be councillors for very long if we did that. But the mayor can direct, but otherwise everything has to be a decision of the council. We set the strategic direction, and then through the CEO, the officers enact that strategy. We have an interim CEO, Colin Jensen. He's the former CEO of Brisbane City Council, who's with us at the moment, and he has been absolutely fabulous. He has been absolutely fabulous. And he unfortunately, it was only ever an interim role that we got him on, and we've said we'll name 1,000 parks after you, Colin, but he's not biting. He wants to go and live a lovely life into his next phase of life. But he's brought so much information, so much knowledge, so much expertise to us, and we are very close to announcing our new CEO who will be joining council. Now, that person has the responsibility of making sure that the directions of council are acted on by the officers, and we're really looking forward to that. There is so much that I could talk to with this, but I'm actually very grateful for the work that DDEC has done. I'm grateful for your engagement with the UDIA, because it's important that where there is common agreement, those are easy wins. We should just be doing that. So I look forward to that coming back to us as well. But I'm really grateful for the work that you've done, and Scott, the slides, those last 3 slides, I kept thinking, leave that one up, leave that one up, leave that one up. Because there's a lot of information out there for us, And to have organisations that distill and direct and focus, that is very helpful. So I'm grateful for that, thank you. But please, questions, comments?
Just 2 questions at the end.
Oh, are we not at the end?
No, I'm going to...
There's more. Okay, back to Ahri. But hold on to your questions.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Let's give Rebecca and Bill a big round of applause. Rebecca and Bill have been stalwarts at Council for tree protection, so we're really grateful for their political leadership and determination in what has been a long and ongoing issue and debate. So who's feeling concerned about what's at stake and whether or not we're going to get it right? Yeah, that's great. I think we can all say that is a feeling. And the next question is, is that concern strong enough for you to consider taking action in your community? Yeah, please raise your hands. Excellent, that's wonderful. Because as I said at the beginning, you know, we've got positive signs that there may be change in this planning scheme, but there's barriers, that there are councillors that don't want to see areas of ecological habitat. You know, I had one sit down next to me at one of the planning and development meetings. He said, "Oh, Ahri, I have people talk to me and they say they want street trees and stuff, but yeah, just not really sure the community wants to see, native habitat protected the way you're talking about." Yeah, and I think that's not the case. I think the majority of the community does want that. And I've been, that view has been reinforced time and time again, talking to people all across the community. I was having a conversation with a group of stroke survivors, and we were talking about tree canopy, and they were all talking about how important it was to keep keep our neighbourhoods cool, and when's it going to happen. So all sorts of diverse people, all sorts of groups feel the support. So we really want to create a grassroots community campaign that really has a conversation with the broader community, where we make tree protection a big issue in the planning scheme consultation process and leading up to that. And we want to engage residents to put pressure on Toowoomba Council in the lead up to the planning scheme and all the way through it. So we're asking you all to consider how you might help us. And the strategy that we've got, and it might be a bit ambitious, but we want to give it a try, is based on what the coal seam gas free movement achieved, where neighbourhoods all across the country, they polled their streets and declared themselves CSG free. And that's something that's happening in Cecil Plains right now, where Save Our Darling Dam is trying to stop Arrow Energy expanding into the Condamine alluvium. And it's something that happened where I grew up in northern New South Wales, where residents in different areas all came together and declared their communities gas field free. And so what we're hoping is to be able to declare our communities tree keeper communities, where the majority of residents want to see tree protections put in place. So that's the vision, and to do that, there's lots of opportunities. There's events, there's doing stuff at market stalls, but the biggest thing that we need to do to achieve that is to have conversations with our fellow neighbours and our community members. So we want to have conversations door to door about what tree protections mean. So simply put, do we support the ability to have corridors of habitat that aren't destroyed when there's new property developments, and for us to be able to nominate urban significant trees for protection, trees that the whole community value and that really create the unique character of our neighbourhoods. That's all we're asking for in being a tree keeper community. There's a whole lot of different policy issues, but that's basically the principles of what we're asking for support for. So we're asking people to take a stand with us on this campaign and consider getting involved. We want to make this big, and we want to really build momentum before the planning scheme is released. So on your chairs, you've probably got one of the action cards. If you haven't filled that out already, please fill that out. There's a few pens on some of the chairs, but you can pass them around. And yeah, we've had a group of people that's been growing over the last 6 months, and there are a lot of ways to get involved. We just filmed a campaign video last weekend in Williams Park, so we've got lots of different things happening. And on the 31st of May, we're having a community conversations training where you can come and learn how to have conversations about tree protections. We're going to try some door knocking as well. We'll make sure we go out in pairs, and if that's not your cup of tea, that's fine. You're welcome to come along and just learn how to have conversations and start with that. But yeah, that's an invitation to come along for that event as well. And here's basically what we're asking for. We're asking for people to, whether they support wildlife corridors and significant trees in the new planning scheme, having protections, and a bylaw so that the community can nominate trees for protection that are in our urban and significant areas that might not necessarily be part of a corridor or habitat. So that's pretty much what we're asking, and we're just going to be going through how to have that conversation on that training day. So yeah, please, when you get a chance, fill out the slips, and there'll be people at the back of the room that can collect them from you when you leave. But now we'll take it to questions, I suppose. Questions, Scott and Rebecca, if you want to come up to the front, that'd be great. And yeah, if anyone would like to ask a question, I can run around with the mic. Yeah, which way to go first?
Thanks, Ari. Just quickly, sorry, Pete. Just to say that I probably didn't make it clear enough, but when the planning scheme is in its draft form, it will be released for public consultation. Is it the second or third?
Third, yeah.
I don't even know if we've got to a point.
No,
This wouldn't be the
18 months
first.
ago or so, because I was on the answering.
Okay, well, this hopefully will be one of the final times, but that is your chance to make sure that your voice and the voices of others are heard. That's your right, and that information must be taken into account when the planning scheme is being considered. So that'll be on the website, but it'll be, I suspect, through
We'll be making
DDEC
lots of
and
noise about it, so everyone knows.
you shouldn't be able to miss it. If you miss it, that's a failing on council's part. Every single person should know that it's happening. And also just to say that yesterday, 3,072 people from Highfield signed a petition on the town centre. So it is people do care, and they're willing to put their names to things and act. So
Could you just say that number again?
3,072.
Yes.
We'll know next month, but I'd say yes. I think we're pretty close to landing the plane on it.
Rebecca, how long is the open for consultation and feedback?
How long will the question was how long will the consultation and feedback be open to the public for? To be honest, I'm not sure. Bill, how long did they do it last time? Months?
It's actually got to go back. It's got to go out here to the minister first for a legal draft. Then it comes out to community consultation. It hasn't been yet.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that you're talking about the planning scheme, because as Bill just said, there's another step to go, which is it has to go down to the State Minister, Planning, who's Jared Blade, and he has to say, yep, this is in keeping with what we understand we want from planning, and then it comes back to council, and if it's all good, out it can go. But otherwise, if the state government says no, there's problems here, we have to fix those problems before it can go out to the state, to you and everybody else in the region for public consultation. The question was how long. I don't know how long. It'd be, I'd imagine, months. This isn't a quick process. This isn't like 21 days and close. It's a a long process.
I know in the past,
Thanks, guys. Coming from where I come from, and a lady who's very significant in my life used to work for federal government, and she worked in a interesting department which is very specific to what we're talking about tonight. She's just about given up because when she looks at it, she said, we're fighting an establishment which doesn't want to know because they want to please other masters. I'm not saying there's corruption, I'm just saying there are other masters out there who have a bigger agenda. Now, my observation and my question is that we're picking on the right toes here to bang on. Sorry, Councillor, it's not that you're small, but should we be aiming a lot harder and a lot higher and hitting a lot harder at a certain area of the body to make the state government and the federal government start to take notice? I understand the levels of government. I'm not used to council type government, but I am used to two-tier. ACT for 50 years was certainly a long time to put up with the way things worked. But should we look at how can we assist council to some state where it hurts?
Just one thing, Pete, why this, I guess, began with Reefs Road is it became very clear to me that we have a hole in our bylaws here that allow trees to get wiped out as long as there's no endangered species in there. There's a certain level of protection at the state and federal level that exists, but it's useless if it allows habitat to be destroyed because the habitat itself isn't endangered, but endangered animals rely on it. So what I'm talking about here is, for example, koalas or glossy black cockatoos. So as long as there's none of those animals in the tree when you cut it down, under our current bylaws, you can go cut it down. And so that's a hole that needs to actually get plugged at the local level, which is why we've been very focused on that here and in regard to the, trying to get those changes in the new planning scheme. There's plenty of issues with the EPBC Act, and I haven't gone over the Queensland Nature Conservation Act in a whole lot of detail, but I'm sure there are opportunities where state and federal could be improved, but the big clincher at the moment in our regional council exists in the regional council bylaws. So.
Just a final comment on that, Scott. The problem with tree clearing is we as non-nocturnal animals, we go and knock down the habitat during the day. The problem during the day is when all the nocturnal creatures are in the trees asleep and you can't see them. People say, oh, there's nothing there.
Yeah, and then you get really badly injured possums and things like that when they come down. And
I'm sorry, I'll just comment. If you look at Ahri in Crow's Nest, talking to one lady whose house happened to be next to the forest that got decimated in the riverside. It was absolutely sealed up. And her house suddenly filled up with all these minor mussels, with all these small possums, small loaves, everything from reptiles to mammals to getting on. Again, talking about the forest, which is what's going on. The entire city that was all those trees. That's great. We're not angry. Nothing I can do about it. I want to watch a tree that's been there since before the first week. Get knocked over in a few seconds. There's no thinking. There's just no logic to it. It's quicker, easier, and cheaper to just sorry, I'm getting upset.
Thanks. It's an emotional issue, and unless we fully feel the depth of emotion to the environmental crisis, we don't have the capacity to see the full truth of what's happening and respond with the full energy and clarity that is required. And that's what I think, I've been an environmentalist since I was 16 years old. And one of the biggest challenges our culture has, and this is why we've got to learn from Indigenous cultures so much, is that we really suppress a lot of emotion. We really hold it down. So that's actually a big barrier to us achieving the social community momentum to creating change. Just on the wildlife carers, because you mentioned, I forgot to mention earlier, we're having a fundraiser on the 11th of July at the Eco Hub. Half the money is going to go towards this campaign, half the money is going to go to local wildlife carers. It's called the Full Moon Winter Warmer. So that's another way to contribute. There's posters on the back table. Come along, have a feed, get some sweets, and all that money is going to be going towards supporting this campaign and supporting local wildlife carers looking after all the animals. Yeah. Cam, did you want to ask?
Yeah, I can use my teacher's voice.
Yeah.
You touched on the emotions there. I watched the live streaming of your emotional presentation, Rebecca, at the time when the actual TPLC was cut back. It is an emotional issue. We know where we have to focus the target. Where do we have to focus our energies with regards to the ones who weren't emotionally engaged in the council meeting room to get it across the line? Because you certainly were.
Oh dear. Look, we each bring different things to the role, and people vote in or out depending on what you're bringing to the role. So everybody who's there has been supported by the community to sit around the table. I've been there for 5 years, as I said, and I have to say this is the best it's been. We might not agree on everything, but we can usually get to a consensus point, usually. That example, there was no consensus point. So really, be it local, state or federal, what we listen to and what we should be listening to is people. So your question, I think, Cam, was how do you convince individuals who may have had a position in the past? You have to talk to them. You have to explain to them, and it has to be a compelling argument and a sound, reasonable argument. And I think that they are. And I think we're on good ground with the work that has started to happen between DDEC and UDIA, because there will be instances where we can't come to a common ground, but it's really just such a hard slog when there is adversary on every single issue. And having a conversation, sometimes you realise there are things that you can agree on. And so you can bank them and move on to the next. But, you know, all of our meetings are live streamed. There is a public gallery. You're all welcome, and so is everybody in the community, to sit in on those meetings. And so you can see how the votes go. You can see what people say. If you can sit through, 10 hours of a council meeting, more power to you. But you can also see the particular bits and fast forward to them so that you don't have to endure the whole bit. But I do also want to point out there are people, and I see Mr. Gibson over here, who are building homes really sensitively, have been doing so for years. And I think it was 2020, I came out to see the place just near, in from Kingsthorpe, on the other side of Gowrie. Yeah. So there are lots of people doing good work, and they are influential in the industry as well. So, you have to find ways to thread that needle.
Is there any point in forming a committee, a group from here, to get together to ask questions of councillors standing next year, their views on specific questions that we can either vote in or in or out?
Two things. Thanks, Diana. The question is there an opportunity for a committee to ask councillors their opinions to vote them in or out? First thing is, you've got us for another 3 years, because our next election is not till 2028. But DDEC run exactly what you're talking about in the lead up during the election campaign, and this last one in 2024 was held at the Highfields Cultural Centre, and it was a full house.
Thank you. This is to you, Councillor Vonhof. Mention was made during the meeting today in relation to addressing development creep, which causes habitat loss. We can learn from the European cities who have successfully met housing through prefab housing schemes. Would the Council consider, in relation to the successes in the European cities and the saving, therefore, that results and a win-win for everyone?
Thank you. So we are looking at all options with the planning scheme, because what we understand is that people need and deserve diversity of housing. So a one-size-doesn't-fit-all model. And your specific question about the prefab, there's lots of interest in that at the moment because the building costs of construction are really problematic in the housing crisis. It comes down to building codes and building standards in some instances, and that's one where we have to work with other tiers of government because they're the ones who write that legislation. But I think they are, what I hear is that they are on it and looking at it because it's cheaper and faster. Not for everybody, but for the ones who do, that's an option.
Thank you.
Yeah, from our meetings with the Urban Development Institute of Australia, they like building kind of your conventional suburbs like what we've seen in the Avenues and in Glenvale and in a lot of community developments around here. And there's not much financial, I think it's financially better off for them to do that, to build medium density, to go up a bit is actually quite expensive. So we need those state development requirements for that to happen. So to do that, we need to really closely monitor what signals through those regional plans and those mechanisms that the state development and infrastructure minister is giving, and also the council has a role to play as well. So that's something that we've got to really monitor and try and send a signal to property developers that people want a diversity of housing. And I went to the Planning and Development Forum this week, and that's what the council was telling the property developers. They're saying, we've been talking to the community, people want different types of housing, they don't all want the same type that's going to cost, that's very expensive, big houses on little blocks with no room for trees and things like that. We want mixed residential with different options for different people. So it's a matter of those different levels of government, state and local, sending that message so that we can actually, because that mixed density means that there's more opportunities to be creative and keep corridors of habitat rather than just clearing it all. And parklands that keep those big old trees that are a bit more scattered. There's more opportunities there, so we've got to find ways to put pressure on those different levels of government around that, but also property developers as well. Tell them this is what we want, and send them a signal, and then communicate with them. Maybe we should write a property development a letter week or something like that. Property developer a letter and remind them.
Not everybody needs 4 beds with love.
That's right. That's right.
Just on the I don't want to butt in my mate Beck, but one of the most powerful things you can do as one who sat on the inside with Beck is to make yourself aware of the right questions to ask. And can I implore you to this guy and others, that one up the back there, because particularly I appreciated your presentation, Scott, the last few pages there, where you were talking about some of the technical stuff that you as a group and the broader community really need to take the time to make yourselves aware on the questions, about the questions to ask. In other words, you have to make it as hard as possible for people to say no. And how you do that is around availing yourself of some of that tech. It's as boring as that, you know what, sometimes, but unless you do it, you will tend to be fragmented in your message, and politicians love fragmented messages. They'll tell you go away and sort out what your priorities are and then come back to us. Have you ever heard that one? So I implore you to, and these guys are taking on a facilitator role to actually help you understand. For example, there was one in a more technical term. Scott touched on an operational works permit. In other words, the developer must get a permit before they knock a tree over on their land or the applicant's land that they're doing the work for. So how do you arrive at that point? Well, then you've got to understand there are pieces of legislation or local laws, bylaws, and other mechanisms that need to be in the planning scheme to get us there. That's what these guys are talking about. So I implore you to take the time to understand. I'll give you an example, and can I just digress? It's related. I was at the Alternate Energy Forum the other day, just put that on there. And I was absolutely, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but I was absolutely astounded at a group of people with a common interest, how there wasn't a common understanding about the collective impacts of EIS, environmental impact studies, the collective impacts. Because each resource company or mining entity will say, inside our ring fence we stack up. But what happens if there's 6 of these entities in the immediate area? What are the collective impacts? So we're not asking the right questions of the legislators. So we need to be educating ourselves, and it was really good what you had up, mate. Keep pushing that stuff.
What Bill gave you was, Scott gave you was just a snippet of our policy. If you go to our website, and there's a few printouts down the back on the table as well, but just here you can access the full document of all the policy recommendations that we've been putting to council. Well, that looks out of date. Okay, I've got to update that tomorrow. But it's always changing because we're always learning more. And so that's one resource that's available. And then there is also, as I mentioned, there's the Protect Trees website where it's on the flyer at the back of the room. But I'll see if I can find it. And that has all the mapping for the whole region that we've been able to establish. Here we go. And it's going to get updated soon as well with better diagrams, but it it shows North Toowoomba, South Toowoomba, West Toowoomba, Highfields and Frozen area, and you can click through and really look at those ones that we showed on the slides. Yeah, so there's just some of the resources. There's also another, on that DDEF website, there's a full report looking into what's done in other local government areas, all of South East Queensland, and you can see through how they protect trees and what's the mechanism they use and how that's formed the basis for the recommendations that we've been putting to council here.
And wouldn't that help the council as well?
Yeah.
I mean, they've had it for years, and we look stupid.
So what I was trying to say is the weight of collective voice brings change. There's only 11 people in that boardroom, and you need a majority of 11 votes. But weight of collective voice, and I would encourage these guys to run workshops around some of that stuff. That stuff you just mentioned, Aaron. If more people understood what other local government authorities are doing, and you agree collectively that this is the way we want to go, well, then Rebecca and I and our colleagues actually get to hear a coordinated, informed position that the community has. That's what we need. That's what these guys are saying. What do you see your involvement as a group? And not just this group, but the community. So,
We want to see every little neighbourhood and break Highfields up into different sections and spread all around the edges of Toowoomba, declaring neighbourhoods, tree-keeping communities. That's our vision of our campaign strategy. So, Rob, did you have a question?
Yes, I actually got two. The first one was when recently, I think it was at the show or something, I was talking to Inland Rail, and they commented that as part of their environmental offset work that they were purchasing or have purchased or been transferred the block of land, the koala habitat bit at Mount Lofty that was Defence Department and was going to be developed, and that is now going to be protected. Is that true?
Just looking for Chris Michael. She was in the room.
I think it's mine.
I've heard that as well. Shannon Michael is drafting a submission to the EIS for Darling Downs Environment Council. He's local around, he's an oncologist. I've been so focused on this, I haven't had time to look into it.
I mean, if that's happening, I think that sounds a great outcome. So that was just a question about clarifying. My other question though is, and this is about the council planning thing, like if we get something about tree protection in there, do people like the main roads and other state government have to abide by that? Or is that a completely different thing? Like this is only for land that's not owned by state or federal government entities?
Generally speaking, the state can override local government. Often they're reluctant to do that. If a council has a position and they express that position as feedback, a state government doesn't really want to make a rod for their back against a council, but they can typically override local government legislation. Yeah. So,
because there are, if you drive with Highfield, some of those roads are main roads. I mean, the New England Highway is a main road.
I just wanted to make a comment actually. I really like the idea of people nominating a favourite tree or a tree that's very special to them, and perhaps that could become part of the door knocking event, that it's not just sort of asking people to come on board and do this and that or volunteer at a market, but like first of all, can you tell us about the tree you love? Because I think to get the wider community involved, like people need to think of trees almost as people and how important they are to our community. And I just wanted to just mention a project that I discovered after many years living down south, that the Melbourne City Council actually map every single publicly owned tree onto a website. And so if you're travelling around the city and you see a tree that you love, you can go to that website and you can find out what kind of tree that is and how long it's been there for. And you can actually write that tree a letter and proclaim your love. This is true. And someone in Melbourne City Council will reply on behalf of the tree. This is actually like a real project, and actually I think when they started that project it was meant to be something else, and then all of a sudden they were like, it became that kids started writing to the trees because they could go online and work out that it was a Sydney red gum or something, and then write, so you're my favourite tree, I walk past you on my way to school every day, and then the tree right back. So maybe we can think of something really clever, because I don't think it should all be serious, we could find ways to fall in love kind of thing. Yeah, that was my comment.
Thank you.
I'm wondering about the other key party here that is not mentioned a lot, and that's the developers. That rather than an adversarial approach, I'm wondering what opportunities are there for a regular ongoing forum with the developers, not necessarily at the organisation level, but at the individual level, who are involved in our community, and looking at other ways of developing that could be just as profitable as what they've got at the moment, but reducing their risk, giving them other models to see that not only legislation is important to you, but really you can actually make money, you can do a good job and get the community happier by doing things differently. It doesn't have to be cookie cutter like you've done for the last 50 years. I'm wondering, are there opportunities with this? Does that government and the community on a regular basis to liaise with developers?
Thank you for the question. Yes, Council meets with the EDIA every month in a formal capacity. And in terms of what we can do outside of just those conversations, we also have incentives policies, because I think that there's an acknowledgement that if cost is an issue, and cost is obviously the bottom line and the driving force, it's a commercial arrangement for the developers, then the incentives that council offers may tip the scales. So for what we were talking about with housing diversity, we have an incentive that reduces the costs that council would usually charge if a developer does a medium density. So I think what your point is dead on, and like I said, it's a lot of energy if you just can't see any common ground. Sitting down and having conversations and trying to thread the needle in such a way that's the best way forward.
Maybe on Tuesday morning they had the Development and Planning Forum, and I don't know why, but they seem to run it at 7 a.m. So I don't know, something that Labor likes to get up early. My hands are freezing as I rode my bike into town. But all the developers come there, and the council development team planning development team gives a presentation about what they've been doing and how things have been changing. Maybe something that we could push for into the future is like a community development and planning forum that involves presentations not just from council about what they're doing in regards to housing, but also protecting nature while we're building housing, but then also information from developers there as well, and community members and developers and the council all there together talking about the issues. I think something like that on a regular basis would be something we should probably get behind. Yeah, okay.
Rebecca, my question is, I've been watching the planning over the years, and if anyone wants to get onto the development eye and hit the planning section, you can hover, you haven't done it before, you can hover over Highfields or anywhere you live, and you've got a mixture of urban, emerging community, rural, not much rural res, and particularly to the north. It feels like you're playing catch up, where you've already got many years of urban development overlay already that you can't change. You've got the opportunity of, you've got a vast range of rural, or R1 as we call it, to the north here. If you continue on that track, you could stop it, so to speak, or slow it down by going to rural res in 2.5 acre or 2.5 hectare zoning, which provides you with 5 acre properties. There's a lot of 10, 20, 40, 80 acre lots out here that aren't farming, are under the 100 hectares, so you can't do anything with it. You can't provide housing. It's not big enough to run a farm on it. If you then jump down to rural res, you don't need a lot of the water issues. You can keep the trees, you can run sewage and water tanks. And I myself have 150 acres I could develop into 5 acre properties tomorrow. But because you've got that 100 acre minimum, you can't do anything with it. That would shift some of the urban people out onto hobby style farms, free up housing in town, stop the urban sprawl with 600 square metres, so you can stopgap it in your overlays. I don't know whether that makes sense to what I'm trying to say.
So a couple of things kind of come to mind as you're speaking, and that is everything's on the table at the moment as we look at where we want
Sorry, I
people.
might just say, I know the shaping South East
Yeah.
Queensland control that sort of. How are you guys going to go with? I put that suggestion in, and that doesn't suit shaping South East Queensland. And I know I've had several meetings with the town planners, and they're on a different scale. When I tried to do an 80 into 5 watts, so to speak, they go, oh no, we'd rather leave that to be the avenues in 50 years' time. So how do you go about stopgapping that sprawl?
So one of the big things that it's no secret, we are financially really constrained. We've got to spend $270 million on upgrading the dam spillway. And that, to give some perspective to it, is more than we spend every year on all of our roads, all of our drainage, all of our parks, all of our playgrounds, all of our everything put together. So we have had to, in the last couple of years, become really focused with where we spend our money, how we spend our money. And when we're doing planning and thinking about where we want people, we can't, we've got a natural border with the range on the east, and then we just go north, west, south. But we can't allow development anymore to go everywhere because we can't afford to. We physically cannot afford to provide the infrastructure, the roads, everything that goes with that. So we are being really mindful of channeling development in particular areas. Now, to the north of here, there's constraints because we have areas of ecological significance. And to the south, around Westbrook, it's a different situation. And I think you can probably pick up some cues from where council's head's at, because we've put we're putting in $25-ish million for a water treatment plant at the south. It's not really going to shift the dial on getting that built, but it's going to get all of the pipes connecting to it built. That signals that we want people to push in particular areas for their housing because we can't afford to go everywhere. I don't know if I'm really addressing your question about the rural res, but if the
rural res, you don't have to provide that water.
But if the state, there's other like the roads and all the rest of it.
But you could also have the developer build the required road at their cost. There's ways to work with that without having, and you've still got your reticulated water system which you have on the edges of high fields as well.
It's just that it's not fully recovered, like the costs don't recover for council. So I'm not ruling it out, but I do think if the state, if it's not in keeping with what the state wants, I don't know how fertile that ground is for anybody, because the state will determine yes or no. So I don't know, it seems like a really specific one. Maybe there's ways and means to have those conversations and put it in for the feedback, though, with the consultation of the planning scheme.
Is this a way of buffer zoning the
what we don't want is urban sprawl.
Yeah, but that might cap it in certain areas as you move more.
And we are going to have to do much more infill, which basically means instead of new developments in particular areas, we're going to have to take what's an example? Newtown or Mount Lofty, and we're going to have to increase the density of the houses that are there, the number of people that live in those places, because the infrastructure is already there. The roads, the sewerage, the parks, all the rest of it, that's already there. So we have to fill in and not go out.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Thank you, Scott. We're going to finish up there. Thank you all for coming tonight. Let's do a protect our trees all together, right? 1, 2, 3, protect our trees. Protect our trees. Thank you very much. And please fill out the action cards. Please consider getting involved. We've got a movement to build, and I think we can make a real difference between now and the planning scheme when it arrives, and really nail this issue and get some strong action on it going forward. So thank you all for coming, and we hope you join us going forward.